Guys, welcome into Dog Central. It is Wednesday, December 21st. We are creeping steadily towards Christmas and the college football playoff, but put all that aside today for National Signing Day, early National Signing Day, which has basically become National Signing Day for 85, 90% of recruits, maybe even higher. Not sure what the exact number is. As always, I am Graham Coffey. I am here to chat with you guys a little bit, put a bow on takeaways from this 2023 UGA recruiting class that isn't totally done, but it's done enough for us to have a feel on what it is and where it is and what we can expect from Georgia going into the next cycle. Also, I want to chat with you guys a little bit about where UGA is in terms of transfer portal targets. There is a lot of interesting stuff going on there. If you are a Dog Central subscriber, you know Georgia's in on some very big prospects. Jason Brazel, one of my partners in Dog Central, incredible recruiting reporter, one of the most plugged in dudes that I know when it comes to all things Georgia. He and I both have been putting a flurry of updates up on the Dog Central forum lately. If you have not subscribed to Dog Central yet, you really ought to check it out. We are doing a holiday special, $60 for a full year. There are some free trial options on there where you can check it out for a week before having to pay anything. Like, we believe that if you come to Dog Central and see the community, participate in it, hear what we hear, and what we share with our subscribers, that you won't ever want to go anywhere else. So I encourage you to check it out. That is my spiel and pitch. Thank you for bearing with me. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the this class from Georgia, this 2023 class. Seventh straight top 3 ranked class from UGA. Just a really, really impressive job by Kirby Smart and the staff. This class was a little bit interesting from the perspective that Georgia, they didn't lose, they didn't lose offensive coordinator last year, but like this staff did go through a lot of turnover. You lost your wide receivers coach to LSU. Your defensive back coach, Shamil Adai, went to Miami. Todd Monken stayed, but Dan Lanning left. Glenn Schumann stayed. Will Muschamp comes on board. Mike Bobo comes on board. Like, there was a lot of turnover here. One guy that has come up a lot, I think, looking at this class, one takeaway for me is that Fran Brown did an incredible job coming in this cycle and kind of not just picking up where Adai left off, but really even ratcheting things up to another level. Like, Georgia's defensive back class in the 2022 cycle was one of the best we've ever seen in college football. And normally when that happens, you're going to have a hard time convincing kids at that same position room to come in the next cycle that are highly ranked. You guys know how things go these days. Like, the top prospects, they want to play immediately, and they look at depth charts to figure out where they can do that. So for Georgia, landing a guy like AJ Harris, the cycle after you landed Julian Humphrey, Jaheim Singletary, Dalen Everett, like, those were guys that were 5 stars, depending on which service you subscribe to. And you go out and you get a 5-star in AJ Harris, who, again, depending on which service you subscribe to, is either, one of, if not the best defensive back in the country, but a consensus 5-star, and a guy that I've had a chance to talk to and interview, and just couldn't be more impressed with. Like, when you talk about a player who has like that dog sort of mentality, that's it, man. Like, you talk about a kid that I think is perfect for Kirby Smart in terms of like his ideal of how you should play the game. and the mentality that you should play the game with and the work ethic that you should bring to your craft as a defensive back or as any player, AJ Harris checks that box big time. Like, he's going to be a stud. It's hard to play early on defense at Georgia. It just is, especially with the amount of talent in that corner room. But there's a guy that could do it. Harris is on my list of potential. Like, I will not be surprised at all if he comes out next year and does his thing and is, out there on the field. Maybe it's a Dalen Everett type of role, like what we saw this past season with Everett, where he kind of was that first guy off the bench for the boundary corner spot. But depending on who stays and goes in that room, and some of the transfer portal going ons, which I promise we're going to get to in a second, AJ Harris could play for Georgia next year, and just a very complete player, and a guy who we interviewed on the 100 Sanford podcast with George and Lamar and Trey, and literally said to us, like, I know I'm a 5-star, and when I come on the field to play games, like, I'm not letting anybody get their offers off of me. Like, I'm here to shut people down. I'm not going to be the guy that gives up a bunch of plays to some receiver, and he shoots up the recruiting rankings because of it. And if you look at his tape and the stats this year, I mean, I'm pretty sure 8 games into the season he'd given up 1 catch for like 7 yards. Kid's a stud. He's really, really good, and he plays the run very, very hard-nosed manner. So he is going to fit in very, very well. Looking at kind of the more spots on defense, I'm not going to cover every single guy in this class, but I will share with you guys just kind of ones that really stand out to me. I really love what Georgia did at edge in this cycle. You get Samuel Mpemba out of IMG, and you also get Damon Wilson, out of Venice, consensus 5-star, top 10, 15 player in the country. When I talked to coaches throughout this cycle, I had some coaches tell me, like, I think he deserves to be in conversation for number 1 overall player in the country. He's that good. And from a character standpoint, like, a guy that, his team down, overmatched, and he's still going to go out there and he's going to give it his all on every play. He's making tackles for loss, like, very, very disruptive player, and played at a really high level in Florida. So one to be excited about. That was kind of one of the guys still left out there today that wasn't officially in the class. Been probably last 4 or 5 days, we'd been reporting at Dog Central that we heard he had given his commitment silently to Georgia's coaches, kind of mid to late last week, if I recall correctly. So not unexpected for him to join the class, but a huge pickup for Georgia regardless. As far as other guys who joined the class today, Kyron Jones, interesting prospect. If you go on the recruiting stage, you're going to see Jones listed as a running back. In reality, he is, a guy with a lot of length that Georgia kind of seems to want to do the Eric Stokes plan with. NC State, where he was committed, offered him the opportunity to play running back. Georgia said, hey, we think you have the body type and the skill set, physical attributes to play defensive back. You're talking about a guy with speed and more speed, quick twitch player. Very interested to see how he sort of plays out. Definitely more of a developmental prospect, but, like, if you look at Georgia's record with 3 stars, it's incredibly good. There's Jordan Davis's and Eric Stokes's and, Tay Crowder, who was a 2-star. Like, Georgia, when I did the development quotient last year, was putting about 20% of their 3-star recruits in the NFL. That national average is a little under 5%. I believe it's 4.8. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but it is in that ballpark. So Georgia puts 3-star recruits into the NFL draft at a rate 4 to 5 times that of the average college football program. What that tells us is, like, Georgia is not just out there star hunting these guys and working off of recruiting rankings. They are doing their own evaluations on these prospects. And in some cases, they're finding guys that play other positions and they're, going so deep into the wormhole on tape to look and say, hey, like, we think we can turn this dude into a high level SEC corner, and that was the case with Kyron Jones. Peyton Woodring is one that I think is obviously not going to be a headliner in this class. Kickers never are, but that's an important spot for Georgia. Podlesny, kind of getting towards the end of his career, on the way out soon. I'm not sure how, I think he has COVID year, so I'm not sure if he'll play another season or not, or sort of, where he'll go. I don't expect him to transfer anywhere. If he's playing college football, then I expect him to be at Georgia. But kicking game is important, guys. Special teams win and lose games in the SEC and in, high-level games all the time. Woodring's a kid that hit a 60-yard field goal in high school in Louisiana. He's a stud. So important to bring him into the equation. Great to have them, in the fold for Georgia. As far as other players that I really like in this class, Raylan Wilson, just an absolute freak of an athlete. Talking about a guy who comes in, this whole linebacker class is pretty ridiculous for Georgia. I mean, you've got Wilson, you've got CJ Allen, who's a stud, and you've got Troy Bowles. So Georgia signs 3 of the top 5 inside linebacker prospects in the nation. I don't think there's any question kind of who linebacker U is right now in college football. It is 100% located in Athens, Georgia. Really like all 3 of those players. I love Bowles' ability to play the pass. I mean, he covers guys 20 and 30 yards downfield like a defensive back. Guy who has, multiple pick sixes in his high school career. I'm not talking like, 20-yard pick sixes where he jumps a screen. I'm talking he's 20, 25 yards downfield, end zone coverage, reading quarterbacks' eyes, flipping his hips. Like, he is a guy that I think has a skill set that is becoming more and more important in modern college football as more and more teams run these spread offenses that are wide open. And I mean, look at Georgia, right? Like, it's really hard to defend the middle of the field if there's good tight ends on the field and there's running backs who can catch passes. And, that's been part of Georgia's recipe under Todd Monken for the last couple seasons. And what's successful in college football often gets duplicated. So being able to kind of defend yourself in a sense, if you're a high-level program like UGA, is important. And I think they do that better with this linebacker class. I mean, Wilson, as far as size and speed combo, like 6'2", 213, and guy who runs I believe his 100 meters is in the 10-second range, like 10.7 maybe. Let me look it up real quick. I don't want to give you guys any false information, but just, yeah, 10.91 in the Florida State track meet and the 100 dash. Like, just absolutely stupid athlete in terms of what he can do. So very, very interested to see what Georgia does with him. I think he's going to be just a fascinating prospect. All right, I might be wrong. Yeah, 10.91 mark, personal best, Raylan Wilson. There you go. Boom. Other players I like in this class, just kind of across the board, I think Georgia did a good job of getting Georgia guys, right? Like, if you look at what the difference between Georgia and Alabama is right now, in my opinion, it's like recruiting mentality as much as talent. Like, yes, you have to have the base level of talent, but I mean, to oversimplify this, what I'm about to say is definitely an oversimplification, and it's probably going to make some Alabama fans mad, but like, you don't see Georgia's dudes on TikTok usually like doing a bunch of dancing or begging for a spot in the college football playoff. Like, Georgia kind of gets some guys that, when I say they have an edge to them, I don't mean that they're bad kids or that they're angry or that they're mean or that they're troublemakers. I mean that when they go on that field, like, they are there to bring hell and wreak havoc, and they come with a little bit different level of focus and mentality. There's some ball players, and Georgia, I think, did a really good job in this class, especially on the defensive side of the ball, of getting guys that are going to be coachable and that they're not going to kind of break. And it's hard right now with the transfer portal sometimes to recruit guys that will come in and be coachable, because there's always that thing in the back of their mind where it's like, well, I was a 5-star recruit. I can go maybe, a program level down or two, even to a mid-tier SEC program, and they're just going to promise to put me on the field right away. So finding guys that are going to come in and take coaching and be competitive and aren't going to be scared of getting recruited over because they have that self-belief is probably maybe the most important thing about this run that Georgia's on right now. Like, they have managed to kind of keep a program mentality and a program culture that is more akin to what you saw with elite SEC programs a decade or two ago, despite this NIL and transfer portal era. So I think there's guys in this class that kind of fit that mold. Gabe Harris is a guy that committed to Georgia a long time ago and had a really impressive season at IMG, and his body changed quite a bit kind of over this past summer before this current season. Like, I really like him as a prospect. I think with Impemba and Wilson getting added to this edge class late, people sort of forgotten about him, but I think he's right there on that level, with those guys. And it wouldn't shock me if maybe, it's going to be interesting to see if those three kind of who starts getting reps first next season, and a lot of time between now and then to figure out how that looks. And obviously at Dog Central, we'll, we give you guys thorough practice updates in the off season, and we'll find out how they look. But I'm interested in that. And one other guy that I really want to point out in this class is Jamal Jarrett, 6'6", 340. You look at Georgia's defensive line this year, and it's different than last year. Like, they don't have that true kind of zero tech defensive tackle that's going to, that's really a nose and is going to play over the center and, in the A gaps as much. Like, they have Zion Logue, they have Jalen Carter, they got Warren Princeton, like they have Nazir Stackhouse, who has, I think, been very, very, very important and very underrated playing the run for Georgia this year. But those guys are different body types. Like, they're more of a slimmer defensive tackle, and both, a lot of those guys can play outside as well. Ingram Dawkins is another one of them that can line up a defensive end and play that kind of 4-eye inside defensive end like Trevon Walker did, but also plays defensive tackle. But they don't have that true nose like Jordan Davis was for them last year, who is just going to like occupy bodies in the middle and blow up the A gap with a strong amount of consistency and take up blockers to free inside linebackers to kind of, blitz up the middle and do different things. And they've still been really effective defense, particularly playing the run. But you put a guy like Jamal Jarrett, who is 6'6" and 340 pounds and maybe a little heavier than that, and is quite a good athlete. You put him in the middle of that defense up front, and then you've got Raylan Wilson and Bowles and all these guys at linebacker, CJ Allen, and some of the guys currently in the room. Like, that gets scary again for Georgia, and you can do a lot of things from a blitz package standpoint when you have a nose like that you just can't. As good as Jalen Carter is, and incredible as he is, and as much as he allows Georgia to do, like, people don't realize Carter's not rushing the passer on every down. A lot of times he's playing what you call two gapping, and he's responsible for the gaps on either side of his shoulders. And so he's not trying to get upfield. He's trying to make sure he's gap sound and he's there to defend the run if a running back comes downhill. But when you have a guy in the middle to play nose that's that size, that's 350, it frees up more of your linebackers and more of your defensive linemen to just pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. And as we've seen from Georgia this year, they can get pressure when they want because their blitz packages are awesome, but they don't get pressure with 4 a ton. A lot of that's due to quarterbacks getting the ball out quick, but like adding these edges and then putting a nose like I'm sorry, like we were just talking about, oh my gosh, Jamal Jarrett in the middle, and then putting this type of speed and athleticism at linebacker to kind of blitz in from that second level of the defense. That gets really scary quick. Yeah, moving on. Wide receiver, interesting what Georgia did in this class from a pass catching standpoint. Anthony Evans, Yazid Haynes, both guys that are legit, like 4.3 speed, just absolute burners. Not the biggest, but you get the ball in their hands and they make one guy miss and it's over. Like they're not just speedy, they're speedy for college football level. They're Arian Smith, Mecole Hardman type of speed in some cases. So you pair that with a guy like Tyler Williams, who is more your traditional outside receiver body type, 6'3". Like, I'll go ahead and say it now. The guy in this class that I'm most excited to see what they become is Williams. Really raw football player. Didn't start playing the sport until high school. High-level basketball player. Had offers to play basketball from places like Syracuse and legacy basketball programs. 200 pounds. He's not a stick at 6'3", maybe 6'3.5". Like he's built kid. He's very muscular, but you do not see lateral agility like he has out of your average boundary receiver or your average guy with his size and frame. Like he can, he returns kickoffs, he returns punts, and his ability to stop and start and to move sideways and cut and make people miss is very, very impressive. And when you couple that with the ability to high point the ball, you have something that I think could be very, very special. So I'm very fascinated and excited to see what he becomes for UGA, and then coupling him with those speed guys and Evans and Haynes. And then you look at tight end and what Georgia did in this class with that position. Very fascinated to see how that kind of ends for Georgia. This tight end class. You have Spurlin and Lawson Lucky, legacy guy. Both big guys. I would say Spurlin is more your pass catching style, and Lucky is. I don't want to pigeonhole him as a blocking tight end because, go watch his high school tape. He's got good hands. But you still have Deuce Robinson on the line. Very interested to see where he goes. Where Georgia goes in this class. Like if they are able to add Robinson to this class, it's going to be very, very scary for defenses to deal with this kind of mix of pass catchers. It's going to be similar to what you have talent-wise with Bowers and Washington right now at the tight end position, but I think you're adding, a little more speed at wide receiver, and it's going to get very fascinating. Georgia's also in on 4-star tight end Walker Lyons out of Folsom, California. As you know, the last time Georgia went to California and got a tight end, it worked out pretty well for him. He's an exciting prospect, decommitted from Stanford when David Shaw stepped down. Jason feels like Georgia's very much in it for him. I would agree. Robinson is getting to the point where I'm feeling more and more confident that Georgia's in a really good place. You can never call these things. Recruiting's always crazy. Talking about young kids that change their minds quickly, and then when you add the NIL element to it, it is more unpredictable than ever. But I like where Georgia is with both those guys, and you add either one of them or potentially both of them, then you're talking about probably the best tight end class we've ever seen in college football. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but it's up there. I mean, you're talking about 4-star plus tight ends, 3 4-star tight ends and a 5-star tight end in Robinson. That's silly. And, Georgia's linebacker you on defense and their tight end you on offense right now. And those tight ends give Todd Monken so much variability in play calling, and the way they run block means you can't go light against them. The way that they are athletically, and the ball skills they have and the route running ability they have and the size they have means that if you go too heavy and bring in too many linebackers, you're getting toasted down the field. So the conflicts that the tight end position creates in modern college football, very fascinating. And Todd Monken is doing a better job than anyone, I would say, in the sport right now, using those kind of just natural conflicts to his advantage. Tight end is a good spot to transition to the transfer portal. So, look, guys, what I'm going to do right now is just give it to you as raw as I can and as honestly as I can. And as I do this, I want you to kind of maybe think about the fact, like, this is stuff we share every single day on Dog Central with our subscribers. So, again, if you haven't checked it out, check it out, because we share these types of updates all the time, and I want to tell you guys where things are as honestly as we can. So getting into it, obviously Eric Gilbert is in the portal, and not a surprise for us. Something that I've been kind of expecting for a while. Jason, as well. Gilbert, some of the things that involve him and why he's in the portal aren't football issues. And it's been our policy that, like, we're not going to share, kind of detailed private information about a 19, 20-year-old kid. And so I'm not going to start doing it now. But I would say that Georgia did everything they could to move him along in a healthy manner and to keep him in the program and to make him, not make him, but just get him into a spot where he can contribute. And it just hasn't worked. And it's not, no one's to blame here. It's just a situation that, is what it is. And he moves on. And I think, maybe a little bit less bright of a spotlight will be good for him and healthy for him. And so, you wish him well. You hope he has nothing but success. But just from a sheer football position, like I just talked to you about how ridiculous this tight end class is. You have another year of Brock Bowers. Like, Georgia is fine at tight end. With these guys coming in, the talent of this freshman class, I wouldn't be surprised to see not just Gilbert leave, but don't be shocked if one of or both of Brett Seether or Rylan Goad hits the road. Those guys are good tight ends, man. Like, go watch what they do in the spring game, especially Seether. Like, kid's a good athlete, but you're dealing with, like, freakazoids that are top 0.1% of the athletes on earth in some cases with the tight ends that Georgia has, and Bowers and some of the, I mean, if Robinson comes in, it's just like, sorry, man, like, you might be a really good college football player somewhere else, but we aren't putting these two absolute freak shows on the bench to play you. So be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm not positive what will happen there, but just kind of from a number standpoint and reading the room, some of these guys getting a little further onto their careers, let's be honest, like, it might just be time, if they want to play and play significant moments and, meaningful games, it's probably best for some of those guys a little further down the depth chart to head somewhere else. And I'm sure it'll be an amicable split. There's not anything wrong there. It just is what it is. So other positions that, I think we could see Georgia have some transfers out in. One of those would be defensive back for sure. I've heard a lot of different names thrown around. The guys who seem like, and Jay, I want to be clear as I give this intel that, like, Jason and I are in pretty consistent, if not constant contact. We were on the phone an hour ago. So, like, all of this information is both of us putting this together. I don't want to, steal any of his thunder. I want to be clear that, like, he and I are working hard together here on this and both mining our sources to get the most up-to-date and detailed info for you guys that we can over at Dog Central. But names I would watch from the defensive back room to transfer. I wouldn't be shocked if Nyland Green goes. I think there's a chance that maybe he goes through spring, kind of sees where he is on the depth chart. There's just so much talent. Yeah, I mean, Everett kind of came in and sort of passed him up already, but like things can change in bowl practices and spring practices pretty quick. And he is a gifted athlete in terms of size and speed. So won't be shocked if he's able to push through and like get a spot on this roster from a playing time standpoint. But he's been there for a couple of years now, and it might be time for him to go somewhere where he can play. And there's a lot of places he can. I mean, he's a good player. So I won't be surprised if we see him at some point in the portal. Not saying for sure it's going to happen, but one to keep an eye on. Other guys to keep an eye on that are kind of younger would be Julian Humphrey. Didn't really transition super well when he got on campus. Talking earlier about kind of this class, Georgia recruiting a lot of guys that are Georgia guys. Like Humphrey took a little bit of time to become a Georgia guy, but from what I've heard, like he's really had a nice kind of transition during the season and like does things the right way and has become coachable and listens well. So I think that Georgia would like to keep him. I've been told his mom loves Kirby Smart, wants him there. I think he's kind of had a tough transition to college life, as a lot of kids do. I know I struggled when I got to college out of high school. I wasn't trying to play football 40 hours a week. So one to watch is all I'll say at that. I feel like it's maybe kind of one of those that's sort of trending back and forth depending on the day of the week. But he's definitely a name that's been mentioned as possibly hitting the portal and going elsewhere. But he's also talented enough that I think there's people on Georgia's staff. I know there's people on Georgia's staff that feel like if he stays and keeps working and does things the right way, that he could be a contributor for Georgia last year. So it's kind of a tough spot. Another guy that also a former highly rated defensive back from last cycle, Jaheim Singletary, just a name that, big 5-star, very lots of fanfare around his commitment, but got on campus and, he's down the chart a little bit just because there's so many good boundary corners in that room. Keep in mind, Kamari Lassiter is coming back next year, barring something unexpected, right? And so, like, he's the number one DB on this team right now, and that leaves one boundary spot open with Ringo going to the draft. And so there's just a lot of talent there fighting for that position, and that's not a spot where Georgia rotates. And, like they might take those boundary corners out once the game is well in hand, but it's not a place where you're seeing Georgia rotate like they do at inside linebacker on defensive line. So it's tough to keep all these kids. And it's not just doing wrong. It's not a development problem. I mean, you got Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp there. These kids are getting really good coaching, but they only have so much eligibility, and they want to play and they want to put stuff on tape for the NFL, and that's understandable as well. As far as portal targets right now for UGA, I would not at all be surprised if you see a lot of guys kind of on the offensive side of the ball that head into the portal. Guys that Georgia's talking to from a recruiting standpoint, it's very skill position heavy right now at wide receiver. Like we feel like Georgia is more likely than not in this very moment in time, with normal caveats about recruiting and kids apply, but I and Jason both feel like it's very, very likely that Georgia will land Dominic Lovett and Rob Thomas. So, boom, all of a sudden, that's, almost 1,600 yards of receiving coming into the room, something in that neighborhood. That's just a lot of talent. You look at what Georgia's doing in the transfer portal at wide receiver, and it seems very clear to me, like they're very focused on boundary receivers. Like that's been the thin spot. You saw what happened this year when A.D. Mitchell got hurt. Like there were games where Georgia really struggled to beat man coverage on the outside. Think Missouri. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, really good player, does everything the right way. As I said a little over a year ago now when doing the film review for the national title, when Georgia had 3rd and 41 years to go and needed a touchdown to score and beat Alabama and put that game at an 8-point margin, there's a reason Marcus Rosemy was on the field lead blocking for Bowers on that little kind of delay slip screen play that scored the last offensive touchdown of that game. So, like, good player, blocks his butt off, does everything right, but you got Thomas coming in, a guy who, went for 14.2 yards a catch, 7 touchdowns, had a long of 75 yards this year, like has a high level speed and caught 44 balls, 626 yards. Like that's tough to deal with, I guess. Not deal with, but that's a tough ask to kind of hold him off. And then you've got Lovett coming in, likely 846 yards this year, the SEC's 4th leading receiver. A really, really good player. We saw what he could do against Georgia. To be honest, like putting up almost 1,000 yards receiving with Brady Cook at quarterback in the SEC is just like it's crazy. It's really good. So you put him in a system like Georgia with a lot of talent around him. People can't double team him as much, and like this kid could go off. So it's just tough to ask all of those guys to stay. We think Kyrus Jackson is probably going to leave. Technically, he would have I think another year left. He is a redshirt senior, so if he wanted to exercise a COVID option, he could. I don't know if he'll go play football somewhere else or try his hand in the NFL. I'm not sure, but that's one that would make sense to leave. Dominic Blaylock as well. A guy that, man, like, it's hard to critique anything Todd Monken's done or Georgia's offense has done this year. They've been really, really good. The offensive line has improved throughout the season, but you would like to see sometimes you're like, man, like every time Blaylock's on the field, it feels like good things happen, and they do. There's games where he runs, 5 routes and has 3 receptions for 40 yards. Like that's happened this year. But Ladd McConkey at slot, like McConkey is really good. I think Georgia, they've played him at the Z position on the boundary opposite of A.D. Mitchell or opposite of Rosemy a lot because they've been light on outside receivers, but like it's just his natural spot where Georgia's offense could maybe be its most high functioning is having him in the slot. And so you bring in a guy like Lovett, a guy like Thomas, then you're talking about some ability to be a lot more flexible with where you play McConkey and you rotate those guys. You also were looking at, some other spots on the field, other portal targets for Georgia. It does seem like Marshawn Lattimore out of South Carolina sort of felt like he was trending to Maryland for a long time, and then that sort of quieted down. I don't know if Georgia has officially offered him a scholarship yet, but I do know the two parties are talking. That's kind of all we know right now. Stay tuned to Dog Central. That could change tonight. It could change tomorrow. We'll see. And then there's Travis Hunter, right? Like you're talking about a guy that Georgia wanted bad a year ago, went to Jackson State, and then now you got, I think this is going to come down, honestly, guys, just to shoot you straight. Like, I think this is going to be another Dion versus Kirby recruiting battle again for the same player. I think there is a good chance that Georgia lands him. Like, I'm not saying it's happening 100%, but there's a lot of positive intel out there. I have learned, I've done this long enough now to to try and kind of always be like skeptical from a negative standpoint. And when people tell me good things are happening, I usually am sort of hesitant to believe them at first, but like the sourcing on this is getting pretty consistent. I can tell you for sure what I know to be a fact is that Georgia and Hunter have been in a lot of consistent communication. Him and Kirby Smart have talked a lot lately. Like there is a good relationship there. And I think Kirby Smart wants this one bad. Like he's kind of put it upon himself to be the lead recruiter for Hunter over the last few days. He went out to Colorado last weekend, went back to Mississippi, back to stuff. Now he's in Atlanta. What may end up, there's so much talk about NIL and coaching staffs and development, and all of that is legit. But what might end up being the ultimate factor here for Georgia, if he does, swing their way, is that his girlfriend's in Atlanta. And as someone that lives in, the Mountain West, I can tell you Boulder, Colorado is a long way from Atlanta, Georgia. That's a lot of flights back and forth, and a lot of time spent traveling. And her being there and Georgia being close proximity could be a huge factor in this. I think it is a huge factor in this. How big of an influence does it have? We're going to find out, right? But I think Georgia has done a good job over the last 48 hours of really sticking with him, and we'll see how it turns out. I know that's a little bit of a tease or whatever, but I think I'll put it this way: I think Georgia has a very good chance in this recruitment. Like I think that they're right on the verge here, and I think there's some things that a guy with Hunter's ability maybe needs, and like from a development standpoint, I think Hunter and his high school coaches and his family are looking at Athens and they're saying like, we can't really go wrong here. Obviously, there's a relationship with Dion Sanders. I don't know how. There's a lot of talk of NIL, and I keep seeing a lot of Georgia fans in particular be like, well, Colorado's going to drop a giant NIL bag for him. Guys, when you're the number one overall recruit, like he just signed an NIL deal with some venture that Michael Strahan's involved in. Like, you don't really need the school to throw bags around for you in some cases. Like, his brand and his name is big enough to where he'll figure it out. So that's kind of where we stand here. Let me catch up on the chat. Looks like we got some spam going on. Sorry about that. A very good day for you. What about QB? Okay. Willie D. So what about QB? I think where we're at right now is a little bit of a wait and see. I think Georgia is in a spot at the quarterback position. I wouldn't be like, if someone's going to leave, it feels to me like it's going to be Brock Vandegrift, guy who was obviously a very heralded recruit, very talented, but just hasn't, has a lot of natural gifts. The release, I think, hasn't quite ever gotten as consistent as everyone had hoped. I actually heard him. I had a source tell me to watch for him to go to Wake Forest if Sam Hartman does indeed leave, which I think would be a cool fit, and he'd probably work well in that long mesh offense that Dave Clawson runs, and obviously could take advantage of his legs there. But I just don't know if he's ever going to start at Georgia. Right now, it feels like he's not. Now, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it never felt like Stetson Bennett was going to either. So, open to being wrong, but I feel like that Vandegrift maybe doesn't leave this fall. Maybe goes through spring practice and sees where he stands, and then possibly headed out. Right. So we'll see what happens. Carson Beck feels like the obvious heir apparent right now. You've seen him do some really good things on the field this year, which are praiseworthy, and I've been impressed. You see him check a play at the line of scrimmage and work his way through a couple of reads and throw a dart for a touchdown. Like that's what you want to see out of your backup quarterback, who may be a future starter for you. The flip side is the only time we saw him play against a first team defense all year was against Georgia Tech, and he had the fumble, and he also had kind of a throw that should have been a big gain, if not a touchdown, where he was really late on the read and got Cash Jones on a wheel route, kind of lit up, and almost was a pick going the other way. So, all quarterbacks have good plays and bad plays, right? I guess what I'm saying is, I think maybe let's not get too crazy on the Beck hype train until we see him against a little bit more consistent level of competition. I think he's got all the tools and could be really good. I think there's a little bit of a question maybe internally in Athens of just is he ready to be that dude? It's a lot different being a backup than it is, the work and preparation and responsibility and leadership ability that is required out of a starter, not just in the SEC, but in a program at Georgia that some would call the premier program in college football right now. If they win 2 more games this season, then I think it's fair to say that. So that's just a big chip to wear on your shoulders. Gunnar Stockton, everybody loves him. I've heard a lot of rave reviews about what he's done on the scout team this year. I think he's going to be a very good player for Georgia at some point. I just don't know when. I don't know if he'll be ready to really push for that job this spring and next fall camp, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he does. One thing I've been told is that the 2 guys that probably prepare the hardest and watch the most film, do the most homework, really work to hone their craft and their game the most on that roster are Brock Bowers and Gunnar Stockton. And that's not to say there's not a bunch of other dudes working their asses off, because there are, but it's just he's that locked in. Last thing I'll say on the quarterback room is I won't be surprised if Georgia goes to the portal and gets a quarterback. If Grant McGriff leaves, they have to. They're not going to go into the season with 2 quarterbacks, and I don't think they want to go into the season with 3, to be honest. The name right now that feels most likely to me is Hudson Card. Almost flipped to Georgia on his signing day back in, I think, 2020 was when he came out. If there's been people that have told me if COVID wasn't going on and visits and all, contact different, that Georgia probably lands him in that class. You're talking about a guy that was a top 50 recruit, played really well for Texas this year, completed 70% plus of his passes, very player, athletic, dual threat, 6'2", close to 200 pounds, and he did that for Texas this year kind of on one leg. I mean, he was hurt a lot of the time. So I think he's a really good player, and I won't be surprised if he ends up in Athens at all. That intel has been coming in for a few weeks now, and we've talked about it on Dog Central. There's people that feel like Card might kind of be Georgia's to win or lose. There's some people that feel like that's where he wants to be. But it's kind of quiet right now, and I think Georgia might just be waiting a little bit to get through these next couple games and really assess what they feel about that quarterback room. And bowl season, bowl practice has given Georgia kind of a mini fall camp. So in that sense, this is probably the last gasp evaluation for the Vandegriffs and the Becks and the Stocktons on the roster before you decide to go and pull the trigger on a transfer portal quarterback. Because if you do, you're losing 1 or 2 of those guys. So you better be damn sure that you're okay with that, and that you're willing to live with that, and that you feel like you're certainly getting an upgrade. And I think that's the process that they're going through. Harry, last question I'll take from Harry. Excited about the running back room. Do you think K-Mac has the combine? Yeah, I do. I think McIntosh is out. I think he should leave. He's had some injury issues in his career at UGA. This has been the first year where he's been close to healthy the entire time, and he's been a stud. He's really changed his body over the last few seasons, and like he's a guy that runs between the tackles. He is not a scat back. Like he's a tough, hard-nosed football player. I think he'd be smart to go. I won't be shocked if Milton goes either, guys, to be honest with you. Just if he has a big next couple games and feels healthy for the combine, like I won't be shocked. I'm not predicting it happens, but I wouldn't be stunned if it did. I think it's a possibility. Last thing I would say, I guess, about the running backs is just like Roderick Robinson is a guy that I'm really excited about. I mean, won a state championship in California on one leg, kind of. Like, I mean, he had a grade 2 hamstring pull and was running for 4 touchdowns in a state championship game, and had been hurt for weeks before that. Like, people in that Southern California kind of San Diego area, like that, I've seen them say, like, when you talk about the greatest to ever play high school football in this area, you got to talk about Roderick Robinson. And another name that they throw out in that conversation, ironically, is Terrell Davis. So I think you should be excited about him. He is a big kid. He's a thick kid. Like, he's a load. 20, averaged 11 yards a carry this year, 2,400 yards on the ground. Like, I think he is going to be a lot of fun to watch for a long time. 6'1", 230, and he's not a burner, but like he's not slow, guys. Like he's got speed, and just to be honest with you, like in the SEC, there's just so few times where defenses are busting their run fits bad enough to let you pop a 70-yard touchdown. You'd much rather have that guy that when he does see contact, he's getting an extra 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yards. He's moving the pile. That's so demoralizing for a defense, and that's something that you see Georgia do all the time. And I think Roderick Robinson and Branson Robinson, that's going to be a nasty duo. Andrew Paul is going to be a really good back as well, coming off that ACL. But like, get ready for someone to make Robinson Bros T-shirts or Robinson Square, or there's going to be some nickname for Roderick and Branson coming up in the next couple of years, because both of them are good players. That's all I have for you guys today, except for to say again, like, please check us out on Dog Central. It really is a awesome place to be, and feel like we have a unique community. If you are tired of going to college football message boards and seeing people talk about politics or call each other cucks, or I don't know, whatever people do on other websites, like, come check us out. We advertise ourselves as a mature college football community that actually talks about football, and that's what we are. I am putting out a free article tomorrow that's a feature, not so Georgia centric, but I went to the New Mexico Bowl last weekend and kind of asked myself the question of like, where are we with this whole 12-team playoff coming in? Or bowl games meaningless? And hope you guys will read it, because it's, I think, an interesting piece. Thank you to all of you who watch our stuff, who engage with our stuff, who support us. Hopefully we'll hop on here and have a little more conversation before Christmas hits. Obviously, we'll have a ton of college football playoff preview content coming over the next 10 days. I'll be in Atlanta for the game, so would love to run into some of you down there. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Wish you all the best. As always,